guys. So to start, um, for both of you, how has it been kind of with the excitement of seeing I don't want to call it a rise of popularity because I feel like D&D as a whole is very popular, but the rise of kind of this like obsession with watching, campaigns online and like everyone getting involved with like the act of watching D&D as like an art form.
Well, we've been sort of following this trend for a couple of years now. Like it's exciting for us because the television show is sort of the culmination of a long experiment.
Mhm.
Back in 2018, I think is when I approached Ned about collaborating to do a show. Um, and because we had seen this big uptick in this sort of communal thing. And our goal was, how can we expand on that? Um, well, not really expand, how can we sort of distill it down and refine it down into this hour-long program that you see here? I think ultimately the answer is storytelling. Storytelling trumps everything. I've always said you could make a film for $2, and if it's a good enough story, it'll beat a blockbuster every time. Um, so I think the um, the format is very unique. I think people are getting excited about uh, shows like Critical Role and Stranger Things really showed people this idea of you can take something that used to be sort of fun and like let's go on a crazy adventure, and if you really sort of bear down on drama and performance, that this is really sort of an improvisational setting that you can take to a really really interesting extreme, which we're hoping to people we can show with the television show.
For me, I've been playing this game since I was 8, 7, and it was always like the thing I didn't talk about. Like I played sports, I did theater, and I never talked about D&D. And I watch a lot of live play, actual play productions. I listen to a lot of them, and I when I make content, I never set out to be someone's competition. I always want to make a version of a show that no one's done yet in my estimation. And I had always wanted to make a D&D show. I think D&D is some of the most fun storytelling you can have for an audience or just for yourselves at home. And I'd never found the idea that justified making a show because it was always close to this or close to that. And I'd rather go watch their shows and support them than make a show competing with them. And when Brian approached me about Encounter Party with this kind of like grand idea of we're going to capture the full game and then we're going to use kind of the focus that we all have on story and edit the show down to remove the pieces that don't help the audience experience to leave just this tight focused hour-long episode. That was when I was like, oh, here's the idea. Because I'd seen a lot of people be story focused and I'd seen a lot of people, but I'd never seen people actively take the time to make a show better by subtraction in this way. And I this resonated with me, and we set out to make the podcast. And by the fourth day of our podcast release, we were near the top 5 of Apple's New and Noteworthy. And it was clear that this had resonated with people very well, and that's sort of the path that led us to here. It's exciting to me because Brian and I have always said, like, what's exciting to us is finding new ways to grow this art form and grow inside this community. And Encounter Party has always felt like an additive to this group, not a competitor. And
Mhm.
it's so exciting to see the show coming out and have people reacting to screeners and just understand people saying like, wow, this is different. And we never set out to be better. We set out to be new. And that's what's exciting to me.
Yeah, and it is you keep bringing up story, but I do think this season in particular has such a fun kind of story right out the gate because I love the framing of like, oh, there's this dream, and then because I was like, wait, I'm like, 2 people died instantly. What's going like? How is this going to work? And then it's like, oh, it's a dream. Okay. Because, sometimes I'm not smart and my screeners, I missed that 8 minute like intro one.
Yeah.
So I was just kind of thrown to the wolves because I started with the first episode.
Rachel, Rachel, just to be clear, me too. Brian told us we were all going to start on a boat. Like I knew that the moment after the opening credits, that was where I knew we were starting. Brian walked in and said, roll initiative. And you see my jaw go slack. Like, I was not prepped, Rachel.
And it's so
Also,
much fun though.
also, I guess it was a dream, huh?
Yeah, all a dream.
Just a dream. But when you like having it kind of, have a framing device, but having it,
Mhm.
As a group of strangers and everyone is thrown into this mix of we don't know what's going on, but we know we should probably be together to figure out what's going on. Does that make it for, as a whole, a more interesting dynamic to kind of get to unpack this story? Because I think that is what makes Encounter Party so fascinating to me to watch, because it is, as you guys have said multiple times now, so story driven. Because I was
Mhm.
like, every episode ends with kind of a cliffhanger, and I'm like, well, now what's going on now? Because now I gotta
Well,
keep going.
yeah, we have. Well, that's just a TV writing trick to get you
Well,
to
yeah,
come back next
that
week.
too.
But I also have found proclivity to writing mystery thrillers. The first campaign that we did in the podcast was a really just a wild conspiracy that unfolded, and there were literal sort of reveals and twists all the way up to the final episode. So you face a couple of challenges when you're doing it. One of the things that we always have said that we're proud of is one of our primary concerns is we're trying to respect audience time. Dungeons and Dragons is a long game to play.
Mhm.
And there can be programming that people like to sort of saturate in for hours at a time. Um, but we were trying to see again, could we get this down to an hour long program without sacrificing any substance? And that's why I like using the I like using the cooking analogy of a reduction, which is like, we just kind of boil off all the water and just keep with meaty flavor. So we ran into a couple of problems right away. Unfortunately, God bless Ned for allowing me to work creatively without his input as a producer of the program for the sake of performance integrity. That's got to be.
Rachel, I would be on meetings pitching this show, and Brian would say, Ned, drop the call. And then I'd have to go away for 30 minutes on a show I'm making.
Yeah.
And then I'd get a text from him saying I could come back.
Yeah.
Right.
The faith,
That
the
is
faith,
television.
yeah, the faith and the collaboration there is very unique, but also, you feel a lot of responsibility. So we run into two problems immediately when you're trying to get people to enjoy new programs, especially we're 22 episodes of
Mhm.
of a continuous story that just grows and grows and builds and builds and builds over the course of the season. So getting people to invest in that time can be tricky. And so I came up with the idea of this slam opening. Let's just start. Let's not fall into the fantasy trope of we're gonna have a slow build and they're gonna be young
Mhm.
people in a village. You know what I mean? Like, bam! Encounter Party has always prided itself on we start, we go. We're not wasting your time. Here's the story. Um, the other challenge that you run into as a DM and writing is if six people are going on an adventure, why are they all in the same room and why are they walking on the same path? Um, and that's just something that D&D as a game doesn't really do. Not to their detriment. It's usually just the establishment of here's the adventure, pick your characters, go. You're all together. When you buy pre-gens, they don't really give you a setup.
Mhm.
Um, you just start. So these are all writing necessities that we have to do, and we wanted to make sure that if people are checking us out for the first time and buying into this sort of new style of the show, that they get rewarded immediately and they're already active in problem solving and mystery solving and engagement as soon as they turn on the show.
Something
Yeah.
that's fun for me is we built our characters with Brian individually, and we did that on purpose so that we would meet each other live for the audience. So like I didn't know anyone else's character or who they were, or how they sounded prior to that moment in the filmed show. And that was on purpose because our show really prides itself on the audience learns information at the same time as the players, which makes them feel like it's the players are going through the same story as the audience, which just builds an engagement level. And it feels like like the audience gets to have theories at the same time as us, and sometimes the theories are the same and sometimes the theories are different, but it's always using the same shared knowledge. Rarely does the audience have information that all the players don't, and things like that. And part of that is purely built on making a TV viewing experience. But so for me personally, like there's a lot of very interesting stuff where, like, usually in a D&D campaign, at some point you expound on your backstory to help other players know the story you're trying to tell so that they can support you. But in our show, the characters don't know each other, so they're never going to tell each other their backstories. They hold it close to their chest, and you get to watch people choose to let these little nuggets out because the characters are becoming comfortable with each other in the story, and you like watch the party form instead of feeling the party had to be formed from the beginning, which I find very satisfying. As the editor, it was a joy to watch unfold while I was editing the show.
When it is so funny, this is like a question for both of you, but it's like split because I want to know how it is as a DM to try and control this. And then for you, because you said something earlier that I can't like stop thinking about, that you hid that you play D&D, but like you were like, oh, and I did theater. And I'm like, I was a theater kid, and that is not something you're like, and I do theater. It's like, so it's like I like you hid the D&D thing, and you're like, theater.
Yeah.
A lot of people who very clearly did theater,
Yeah.
like playing this doing D&D with Encounter Party. How did you, as the dungeon master, kind of, control everything going on? Because there are so many personalities at times, all trying to get information, and it is so much fun to watch. But it's like when they're investigating things, it's like I loved when Asher at one point is like, I need information. I'm just gonna walk up. It's like, why are you walking up to this? No one's stopping you. And it's like, how did you kind of like navigate that chaos? And like for Ned, how fun was it for you as a former theater kid, getting to kind of exist in that space of D&D with theater people and like
Sure.
Okay, so there's two ways I cheat, is the answer. There's two ways I cheat. So Andrew Krug and I actually went to the same drama school at the same time.
Okay.
And Ned also went to the drama school, but after Andrew and I had already left. Andrew and I had lost contact with each other, but then the casting call went out for this and his name came up, and so Andrew and I reconnected for this project. So one of the ways we cheat is that three of us had the exact same education. So that's
Shout out to
that's
Ithaca
going to
College.
be hard to replicate for people who want to go out and make shows. That's the way we cheat. But we also set out with a very clear goal when Ned and I originally cast the show. And most people have been with us the whole time. David has been with us minus one season. Kari had experience before he came on. What an absolute, God, what a treasure he ends up being immediately. Kari is able to solve things and think about things in a way that some of the other guys can't. He really filled a hole in my needs as a DM as far as people being able to put certain pieces together to make the story go forward. So we wanted two very specific things. We need experts in gaming, and we need experts in performance who understand tropes and beats and stuff so that they can go, we're in a horror scene, we're doing horror. We're in an Agatha Christie scene. Our job is not to make drama. Our job is to talk to people and get information. We're in a comedy scene, cut loose and have fun. And so it really comes down to the cast and knowing the cast and kind of hurting them like puppies.
For me, I think it really comes to what Brian's saying there. Like, our cast is exceptional at knowing whose story Brian is teeing up and how to stay out of the way so they can shine versus who has to be involved to support that story. Rarely is it all six of us trying to talk over each other. You'll notice the story will focus to someone and one or two people will support that and the rest of the people will stay out of the way. And that's one, just useful as an editor. If there's six people talking, the scenes are just longer. We started to feel out like what's the rhythm, knowing that the show had to be 48 minutes when the edits were done. Like knowing that each episode is about 3 hours and 15 minutes down to 48 minutes, roughly. That's like about the average that we ended up in. So we were filming about 2.25 episodes a day on average. And so part of that is around like, well, if a lot of us are talking, we either have to support everyone's idea or cut someone completely from the scene. And rather than do that, let's just be careful about who's in what scene. And our cast feels that almost instantly. And then we sort of rotate. You'll notice if you look at one episode, it might be more focused on X character or Y character. I always say, like, I've now watched the first few episodes, and like Vin is not as totally encompassed in the first episode, but then episode 2, the story really shifts into his point of view. That is purely the table being intelligent about knowing when it's time for who to step forward and when to support and who to bring into the fold. And I think that is what's so fun for me as a theater maker. I don't come from an improv background. I have a degree in musical theater performance. I live in scripted. And for me, even though it's improv, feeling other people recognize the same beats as me makes it feel like I know the script to follow, even if the words aren't written. And that is a joy to me as a performer.
I think as a DM working so long, a certain amount of trust has been built up that people know that, I'm going to make sure everyone gets taken care of, and they just sort of take direction from me. It's difficult to kind of explain. People ask this question all the time, and it's kind of hard because the real answer is completely by feel. I just feel it and I know it, and we're all in step because we've been working for such a long time. But I think Ned just did a really good job of explaining sort of from their side what my cues signal to them. And then it's my job to just justify everything and make everything sort of circle around each other.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for talking with me today. It was so much fun to watch this show. Like, I had a blast because I played D&D for the first time when the movie was coming out, because I was like,
Yeah.
game, I should do it. And I had made a bard and was just causing chaos because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I was like, I'm playing music. And they were like, why? And I was like, I don't know. But like, so watching this is very fun for me. So thank you guys so much for talking with me today. I really appreciate it.
Well, Rachel, keep watching. Really great to talk to you.
It was so much fun. Thank you guys.